Hi, you're listening to the Taking Ground podcast, connecting you to the many excellent churches, ministries and people within our wider family. You can keep up to date with the latest from Taking Ground at takingground.org.uk and never miss an episode of this podcast by hitting subscribe. But for now, here's your host, Rachel Broughton.
So I'm joined by Neil Strike today. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Neil.
Thank you for inviting me.
Really good to have you. I am curious to get into the heart of Hexham Community Church. Mm-hmm. And I'd love it if you could just tell us a bit about Hexham, a bit about where you are in the world, the type of people that you're engaging with that come to your church. And give us a flavour. What's an overview of Hexham Community Church?
Okay, so Hexham itself first. We'll talk about Hexham, the town, because that's quite important. Hexham is a rural town, somewhere between 11,000 and 13,000 people. Lots of history. We've got the Abbey, which is really old, just like me. Although we are a town of about, as I say, 11 to 13,000, we pull from quite a wide area because it's rural. So there's people travel quite long distances on rural country roads to get to what we're doing. The church itself has been going, I think, around about 30 years or so. Started as a small house church that broke away from one of the local churches, and developed to where we are now. We were quite strong pre-COVID. We were probably 120, 130 at least post-COVID, due to various things like everybody else. We're a lot less than that at the moment, probably nearer 70, 75 people, including kids. But a small church with an awful lot of ministry going on, a lot of things happening. So that's Hexham Community Church at the moment. I've been here. I'm in my 14th year, I think, now. So originally came from Tees Valley Community Church.
Yeah, tell us a bit about your journey there. So when did you join Tees Valley, and when were you based there?
Right, so Tees Valley, when I joined it, was still Emmanuel Fellowship.
Okay.
And we were meeting in a very small community centre in West Street in Yarm. So I went through the journey of seeing Emmanuel Fellowship by the church hall in West Street, and then from there outgrew that. I did the children's work there for 10 years. We had what was called Kids Praise then.
Yes, well, my husband remembers being in your Kids Praise groups.
Right. So we had 120 kids every Sunday morning having their own church while the parents were in a different building. We ended up using a school. It was like a primary school every Sunday morning, really. Big team, lots happening. We did that for 10 years. And at that time I was working as a manager in ICI. So it was a part-time role, as it were. And then, of course, we made the big bold step as a church and bought what is now the Oakwood Centre.
Yeah, okay.
So I was there for a long time, became an elder there, eventually came up full-time to do schools work, and then from there lots of other bits and pieces of jobs working, helping the team.
So as someone who worked for ICI and had your role there, that was your kind of career path. So how do you end up going from working for ICI to becoming the leader of Hexham Community Church in this lovely, rural city? How does that happen? What's that journey for you?
Yeah, so because even when I was working for ICI, I used to do some work with the schools. I was a school governor for many years as well. I used to do assemblies. It got to the point where we felt it would be good for me to go full-time and do that work full-time for the church. It was getting to the point where being full-time employed and trying to do what was essentially a full-time job, running kids' work and doing schools was too much.
So, a bit much to balance, isn't it?
Yeah. So I was invited to go full-time and do the schools work predominantly. And at that point, I was doing 13 primary school assemblies once a month in the Teesside area, and doing senior school assemblies in Eggleslip, comp every other week, 3 different year groups. So I was doing lots of schools work, and at that time as well started to run a schools team. We had a little team going, doing schools work. So it was all a lot of schools stuff going on. But I eventually became an elder of TVC, and as I say, about 13, 14 years ago, it became clear that God was loosening our roots and that it was time to move on. I'd felt from being about 18 that there was something in terms of church leadership for me, but I'd waited till I was 42 before it really happened.
There's something in that, isn't it? Like God put a seed in your heart, and actually
Absolutely.
Sometimes it takes a bit of time. For
and
that
it can be frustrating when you
Sure.
sense something very early and have to wait. You know, that God can teach you a lot through that. Of you keep doing what you're supposed to be doing now, despite a future calling.
Yeah, do you think you'd have been ready at 18?
No, I certainly wouldn't. I'm not sure I was ready when it happened. But the previous leader here resigned at Hexham. And so it was, right, who's going to lead HCC now then? And so it's about, it was January 3rd, January the 4th, I was sat in my office at TVCC, and I knocked on the door from Martin Dunkley.
Oh dear.
And he said, the leader at HCC's resigned. And I said, who's going to go there then? And he just looked at me and smiled, and I thought,
Sure.
So that was the start of us. We'd spent 6 months journeying, coming back and forth to meet with the team here, who then felt they wanted to invite me to come and lead the church. And so
And also,
2009 we started leading the church.
2009, okay. Yeah, so it takes a bit of time as well to really hear from God and make sure that that's, again, not just Martin's great idea and good appointment, but actually it's God.
Yeah. And both ways. The church needed to be sure that they were getting the right person.
Yeah.
So that brought us to this church to see what God was going to do, really.
Great. And when you came in, I suppose, what was the culture? And how would you describe that journey for the church?
I think when we came here, it's fair to say, and I don't think I don't want to offend anybody, but I think most people would agree, we were a fairly middle class, older church, and there was little things going on, but I'd struggled with outreach. So that was one thing. We came actually for the first 12 months and just loved on the church. We invited groups around for meals, so we got to know the church. So we spent 12 months just loving and getting to know the church, really, before we did much else.
Yeah.
But there was a real sense that we needed to be more outward looking. How could we do that? And they're the questions we've been asking for the last 13 years, really.
Yeah. So as a result of those questions, what's the church looking like? What are the ministries? What are the things that people really care about at Hexham Community Church?
Okay, so ministries that we're currently doing, we have an Eden project. Although Hexham is quite a leafy feeling town, it's where people like to come and retire.
Yeah.
It's not the cheapest town to live in, which is another challenge in terms of keeping hold of young people, but that's another story. But there also is an estate just down the road from us where it isn't as affluent, it isn't as easy. And so we established, maybe it's about 4 years ago now, I think, an Eden project down there. We were able to lease a big house down there. So we currently have a house with a team leader and his wife living in there. And then attached to that, we have a lounge that we use for drop-ins, coffee drop-ins for Eden. We've been doing gardening, we've been doing practical work on there, just building relationships. And then we have a biggish garage, which we, during lockdown, converted into what is now a community grocery in partnership with The Message. So that's all running down there. And we're really seeing a lot of fruit come through that.
That's fantastic. And so those are the main sort of outreach arms you'd say?
We also, in terms of more central church, we run a fortnightly group for adults with special needs. Been running that for a lot of years now. There's probably about 30 or 40 come every other week. They play dominoes, they do art and craft, they play on Wii and Nintendo, all of that sort of stuff.
That's great.
And that's a support both for the adults with special needs, but for the support workers who work with them or parents, gives them a couple of hours where they can have a little bit of a break, bring their adults and young people too. So that's another strong outreach for us.
Yeah.
And one or two of them now come to church.
Great.
They come on a Sunday morning, they'll be serving you tea and coffee. They're just part of us. In fact, the first 2 people we baptised when we got our baptismal pool here were from what we call the My Time group, which is the adults with special needs, which is quite nice. And
That's
they
great.
would proudly tell you we were the first ones to be baptised in the pool here.
Fantastic.
So that's a work we're involved with here. And we also have a lunch club for 50 pluses, which we do weekly.
Great. And you guys also have a really strong link with Bethel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so when I arrived about, as I say, 13 years ago, I got a call from a guy called Peter Vardy. And Peter said, I'm opening this house for guys who got long-term life controlling issues, an organisation called Bethel. Wondered if you would meet the leaders when they arrived. So I went down to this big house as you come into Hexham, which was pretty much like a building site at that point, and met with these leaders. And that started a connection for us that has developed into one of our key partnerships. So we have a house that I think it holds about 40 guys. It's quite well known in the town now. And they also have a house on the Allendale Road that has ladies in there. And between the two, they now have taken over our cafe. So they run our cafe. It's their cafe in our building. Yeah. And they take one of our Sunday morning services as their service in our building. They have a service on a Friday night here for their people that is open to anybody. So we have a very strong working relationship with those guys. They bring something to us as a church that is refreshing and is different for us, and hopefully we're a blessing to them in their work as well.
Great.
So they do a great work in the town. They've got a furniture restoration business with a shop in town that sells the furniture. They've got a gardening business. They've got the cafe. So they're very well known in the town.
Brilliant. Neil, what are your biggest encouragements at the moment as a church? How do you feel blessed? What's God doing? And
Yeah, by far the biggest encouragement is what's happening down at the East End.
With the Eden Project.
With the Eden Project. I go down there regularly during the week, and it's great to see that, particularly on that estate, where we probably wouldn't have been known much. Now everybody knows who we are, what we're doing. I walk in and people say, "Hiya, Neil." Post-COVID, we've been streaming our services. There are people from the East End who've never been in the building, but they watch our services online, and they're aware of what we're doing. So what's happening down there is a great encouragement.
And I think as well, although you've shared with us that the numbers, look smaller potentially post-COVID, actually the impact is different, and it's sometimes not always helpful to measure how many people are on seats in your building, but actually what's the impact in the city that God's placed you, and that's incredible. For Hexham.
And it's good to see. It's good to stand up on a Sunday morning. When we first come back from COVID, there were more people from the East End than there were of our original members. So it was like, oh, this is a different church. And that's good,
And that's a story that I think is echoed among lots of churches. Every week I do a segment which is worship lyrics of the week.
Right.
And I ask everybody that I interview, is there a worship song that's sticking out to you at the moment that God's speaking to you through? And I wonder if there is one for you.
Funny enough, there's been a worship song going through my head, or part of a worship song all week. And at our men's prayer, early morning prayer meeting this morning, the guy who was running it said, "I'm just going to play a worship song," and it was this.
Was it? Oh,
song.
Brilliant!
And I can't remember the title of the song, but the words that stick out for me is the last line of every verse, and it's "Yet not I, but Christ in me."
Wow!
And I think, you know, as I said to the guys on the prayer meeting this morning, that for me sums it all up. I can look at whatever God's doing here and thankfully say it's not about me. It's only what Christ is doing through me, through those around us, great team that's involved in everything, but it's all about what Christ is doing. So yeah, I think for me that song is quite prevalent at the moment.
Yeah.
Whatever we're doing, it's not us. It's all about what God's doing.
Yeah, brilliant. And if those listening today could pray for you and for Hexham Community Church, what's one or two things that people could just pray over you, pray a blessing over?
Yeah, we've said numbers are not important, but at the same time, numbers are important in terms of it encourages you if numbers are bigger. And actually, it's about workers for the harvest as well. And it's about, you know, as people come in, if the numbers going up, hopefully most of them are salvations. So you know, I want to pray that we begin to fill the church again, particularly with new birth and people that are on fire for God. So pray for us as leaders, guidance, that we keep doing what God wants us to do and not be distracted by what God doesn't want us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for chatting today, Neil.
It's been a pleasure.
I really enjoyed it, and I hope people really get a feel for Hexham, the place, you as a leader, and the community that you're representing and leading. Really appreciate your time.
And if they want to come and visit us once a day,
absolutely.
They're very welcome.
Such an encouragement to support one another as a network.
Absolutely.
and share our time, share our worship with one another.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you've got a story to tell, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear it. You can contact us at podcast@takingground.org.uk. See you next time.